Okay. All right. I want to thank Jason Lefkowitz is producing our discussion tonight, so people will be able to share it with others on particularly Why You Torah, YouTube, and had some interest in that on the especially Why You Torah. They like that people enjoy listening to classes. Tonight is the Mary Hytken Dumont University, and we want to remember Mary Dumont, our neighbor and friend and supporter of the congregation for many years, and her children who founded this program in her memory. We want to discuss the great readings from great thinkers, and we begin with the Sefat Emet. People call them the Sefat Emet, depending on their Ashkenazic pronunciation or Sephardic pronunciation. Sefat Emet, of course, as a Chassid, he would tend to pronounce it that way. Tend to pronounce it that way, but my own Israeli pronunciation, so I often call him the Sefat Emet. We'll go back and forth. His name is complicated. His name is Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Alter. So his last name is Alter. They say his real name perhaps was Rothenberg. He's a descendant of the great Maram of Rothenberg. But that's in the 1200s. Rabbi Yoel Sirkis in the 1500s, and Rabbi Yonason Eibschitz in the 1700s. Rabbi Yonason Eibschitz was the subject of another lecture we had about the great controversy as to whether he was a Sabbatean or not. But let's assume he was a great scholar, and we'll leave it at that. Now, I say his name changed because his name was really Yehuda Leib, but his father-in-law's name was Yehuda, so he changed it to Yehuda Aryeh, or something like that. So that's why there's some controversy about his actual name. He lived only 58 years, from 1847 to 1905. But I like to think that he kind of lived around the turn of the century as we do. So he began his main lectures, we'll see later, in 1871, which is around when I came of sort of some kind of majority age, and he finished in 1905. So I just feel like we're in a different century, but we're living on that same edge of the century that he did. Now let's just go through a little bit about his background. When you deal with Hasidic rabbis, you always have to talk about pedigree and lineage, and school of thought also. So we mentioned some yichus that they had from before the Hasidic days. That yichus precedes the whole notion of being a Hasid. Then his grandfather was the great Chidusharian. The first, what we might call the Ger Rabbi, was his grandfather, and they call him Rim, abbreviating Rabbi Yitzchak Meir. Now he's going to play an important role, as we'll see in a minute, because his father, Rav Avram Mordechai, is going to die when the rabbi is 8. When the rabbi is 8, his father dies, so his grandfather becomes his mentor and his teacher. The Chidush Arim was a student of Magid of Koznitz, one of the famous Hasidic rabbis, and also Reb Simcha Bunim of Pshischa. Apparently, Reb Simcha Bunim was a little different than some of the other Hasidim in that he had been a pharmacist, he had a little bit of a broader education, and he was definitely not into this kind of miracle making that some people would associate with Hasidus. So the idea that there's a little bit of a different kind of Hasidus that may be coming through these rabbis. When it's interesting that his father was one of, please. It's interesting. I'm sorry, it's my fault that the services went later, and then went and started without you. So yeah.
Is this the
no, right here.
Thank you.
B'vakasha. Come on in. Yes. Yeah, Charlie, pull up a chair, but just make sure you're not in the sight of.
Oh, the camera. No,
right.
I want to be on the
Right.
Is this okay?
You're good. So we're talking about the Sefat Emet, Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Leib Alter, and we said that it has certain yichus. We said his grandfather was a great Rebbe. His father died when he was young. He was raised by his grandfather. His grandfather, I heard some legends that he would tell him, all right, come up with 10 new ideas on this, and the grandfather saw that he was going to be a very original thinker. And yes, when you read, he constantly quotes his grandfather, and you can see the grandfather is full of new ideas. So it's all about new, brilliant ideas. Now we're going to talk mostly about his commentaries on the Chumash, which became very popular about 1990 or so. I became very interested in it here in Memphis. No association with anybody else, and everybody became interested. A cousin of mine wrote up some of his writings, and you can get it online, and we'll find out later why that is. But his grandfather as a Hasidic Rebbe, he couldn't just take his grandson to himself to meet a Hasidic Rebbe. He took him to the Kotzker Rebbe. He wanted him to meet a real Jew. In other words, the real grandfather wasn't enough. Chiddushei HaRim, you had to meet the Kotzker. Kotzker, if you ever saw a picture of him, he looks like this. He went through some different, depression or mania or something. The Kotzker was an unusual character. He was sometimes in seclusion, you couldn't reach him. But he was a new kind of Hasidus, a Hasidic approach that didn't involve so much dancing and miracle making and, the Rebbe did it this way, the Rebbe did it that way. He said that was nonsense. You should focus on the nigla, not the hidden Torah, but the open Torah. Now, the Sefat Emet is going to go back a little bit to the hidden Torah, but only a certain type of the hidden Torah, things that you could relate to, things that you could psychologize. Those are the types of hidden Torahs that the Sefat Emet will be interested in. Now, Rabbi, so when Chiddushei HaRim died, he said he wanted his 18-year-old grandson to take over. He said it's ridiculous. So he didn't listen to his grandfather. Someone else took over. The Sefat Emet went to study with the Alexander Rebbe. I spoke to people from Europe who said that the Alexander Rebbe was very famous. And then, when he died, that Rebbe he went to visit died, he became the Ger Rebbe. But he was not going to be like other Hasidic Rebbes, or other rabbis, including me. He refused gifts. In other words, it's not this kind of thing like Samuel the prophet, you bring him a few gifts. No, no gifts. He earned a living. His wife had a little store. She sold something that's sort of anachronistic today, but she had a store, and that's how he made a living. And he once heard that somebody tried to give his wife a discount on her. No, he didn't want any discounts. He didn't want it. So to this day, in the Ger Hasidim, that's one of the features. They don't want you to spend too much on a shtreimel, and they don't want you to spend too much on a house. They don't want you to spend too much on a wedding. They have a certain economic outlook. Now, what were some of the things that were going on in his life? Obviously, he's living in Europe, before the war. It's a tumultuous time, but different ways of looking at that era. But there were great pogroms in the 1880s, and then as he approached his death, they started to conscript the boys, send the boys into the army. A lot of our ancestors came here to dodge that draft. I think my wife's family had some of that. And
This is in Russia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he's living in Poland, but
Okay.
somehow it affected them.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. He had to counsel these boys. What are they supposed to do? They get their draft letters, and what are they supposed to do? And he was trying to encourage them that they could still maintain their Jewish life. And he tried to speak to the authorities. The authorities got suspicious of him that he's trying to get people out of the army, and it was very complicated. They said that when the boys were in the army, he couldn't sleep. He felt there's a Jewish idea that during the war, the leader, like Moses, should sit on a rock. You can't. So he ruined his health, and perhaps it had to do with that he perished at the young age of 58. Now, his weekly and holiday talks from 1871 to 1905, that's 34 years, right? 34 years of homilies. So when you're reading these little volumes that he put together, you get a bigger edition, a different edition, but and you have about 10 pages per parsha. It says in 1871, 1872, what did he say in each year? Each year, 3-4 homilies, 3-4 drushos that he had that year. They were recorded by him after Shabbos, but in very shorthand. He didn't believe you needed long-winded kind of things. His commentary, he does have a commentary to the Talmud, which is very significant. I was told by Rabbi Rosenzweig that his commentary to the Talmud has some points in it that are as sharp as a brisk or as a Soloveitchik school of analysis. It's sharp, but we're talking more tonight about his commentaries on the Chumash. Someone did an analysis to compare his commentary on the Chumash and on the Gemara, and there were some cases where he left a question hanging in the Talmud, but he gave an answer more in his Chumash commentary. So it's interesting to compare the two, but it's not my main field of expertise. In any event, he didn't give a name to his writings when he was living. He wasn't finished. He was young, and he hadn't finished putting it together. His children gave it the name Sefat Emet, language of truth. It was something that had appeared in one of his last talks. And also the idea that it's plain talk. It's truth. Torah is truth, and it's plain. Whereas some Hasidic Rebbes, it's very interesting, and they give all kinds of Kabbalistic interpretations based on the Zohar and this and that. a layman can't really follow what he's saying because it's too much. So for here, there's like a sound bite in every drasha. There's like a sound bite and that's why it's so popular, right? I just open it up. Oh, there's my sermon for this week. That's it. It's a sound bite. He really, people could really relate to it. I'm sure he spoke in Yiddish when he spoke in the crowd, but the writings are in Hebrew, sort of a Hasidic Hebrew that most Hasidic writers don't write with a profound sense of grammar and all that. But it's fine. It's readable. Now there were some other writings that he wrote before that are gathered in this volume here, and that was in the few years before that. Where does it say? Is it here somewhere? Yeah, he started writing 1866. So they're not of the same quality. But interesting, how do I have this? It's an old book. Where did I get this? Rabbi Greenstein was once giving me a tour of his temple, and he showed me that Rabbi Wax in his collection had this book. And I said, oh, wow, that's really exciting. So he said, I could have it on permanent loan. So it's interesting to note that they sent it in with a letter from the grandchildren, sent a letter, and sent it back to Grand Street. And there's a little letter from the grandchildren. It's signed by the grandchildren of the Sefat Emet by S.H. and I, Alter, from 343 Grand Street, New York. So it's interesting. In any event, but those are not his finest writings, but it's interesting to know that they also exist. Okay, now, apparently there was some connection between him and Israel. Generally Hasidic rabbis he's part of the Aguda and not exactly Zionist, but somehow it's not a coincidence that after the war it transferred to Israel. The Ger Hasidus is based in Israel today, although there are branches all around the world. Now, to give you an idea of how popular his talks were, how popular he was, just for instance, one time when I first met my wife, she took me to visit her family, and everyone at the table had a story about how their ancestor had something to do with the Ger Rebbe. Because everybody had something to do with the Ger Rebbe. Because it was, if you lived in Poland, a certain part of Poland, you had something to do with the Ger Rebbe. They estimate that there were 100 or 200,000 followers, right? This is from his grandfather did not bequeath him that kind of. It grew to a tremendous level. After the war, of course, how many left after the war? Today, they say it's only 20,000, something like that, today. But to give you an idea, when he passed away, the tram car, it's so sad when you think about, sort of your cars in Europe full with Jews, but these cars were packed with Jews trying to make it to the funeral of the Rebbe. And then they had a daven mincha in the field. They davened with 20,000 people, right? The cars that seated 44 had 200 people. The Ger Rebbe, they said that in the times when it was time to go, like on a holiday, to go visit him, the Gentiles added extra trains so Jews could get there. People hanging out from their rafters to try to hear the Rebbe. So this was we're talking about someone very popular and very, very deep. Now, if you look here, you have the succession of Rebbes, and we can sort of look at their books. First, you had Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Alter, the Rim. So here's a collection of some of his writings. Chedushei HaRim. He also has writings on the Talmud. Then the next one is the Sefat Emet, which comes in various versions. Recently they came out with versions that had footnotes. The original version had no citations, so the much better editions are coming out today. And then his son wrote the Imrei Emes, so he had his own commentaries. I haven't done much study to figure out how it relates to the Sefat Emet. And then the Beis Yisrael was when we were much younger, until 1977. And then there have been 3 other Rebbes since then. They still live in Yerushalayim and very populous, and they're in many places. They're the largest Hasidus in Israel. Okay, let's move on. Now, enough biography. Now let's get to the meat of things. We don't really talk so much about people. We talk about the Sefat Emet. For years, I don't even know what his name was. The point is, he wrote a book called the Sefat Emet. He's the Sefat Emet. And that's how we talk in Jewish talk. You're known by your book. Unfortunately, it wasn't his name that he gave to the book, but it was an appropriate name. Now, I want to look at different themes that emerge from his writings. And in the process, we'll get a sense of the man. Although, in order to get these different themes, I had to give snippets. In general, as I said, they're very brief. I'll just give a paragraph and that's his homily in the next paragraph. But sometimes he comes back to it a different year. So at the end, if we have a chance, we'll look at one particular homily, how he connects a whole bunch of different ideas together in a very exciting fashion, and how he develops it further in other years. But right now, I just want to look at certain major themes in the Sefat Emet. And since we're in the time where soon we'll be reading Parshas Bamidbar, the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, and Shavuos is coming. So let's look at that. I find, I don't want to be a critic of the Rabbi, I find that his holiday homilies are just exploding with new ideas. In other words, on a regular parsha, you might get something really great, you might not. But when you turn to Sukkot, you just go on and on and on. Just so many, millions of ideas in those, in those 40 pages of Sukkot. So Shavuos is also very, very rich, very rich. Okay, so number one, the bare minimum. One of the things he has to convey to these people, many of him, he has certain roots around Warsaw. He's not so far from Warsaw. Warsaw is a big city. The Jews are slipping. They're slipping away from Judaism. By 1900, 1880, there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, these are the people who came to America, and founded America. Not the most religious types. And he sees these people. Most of the people in Warsaw probably, observe Shabbos to make the rabbis happy. They would close their store or something like that. But that's about it for a lot of people. And everyone's starting to read Dostoevsky and all kinds of different things. And it's the hold of the rabbis is being lost. That's the role of the Hasidim, is to bring people in as a movement for the masses. So here's something about the bare minimum. What's the bare minimum of what a Jew feels? I'm not the Sefat Emet, I'm not a great mystic, I'm not a great Talmudist. What am I supposed to do? It's so hard. Yeah, sure, there are all these legends of the Vilna Gaon and this one who studied all night and he never slept. But I'm just a plain Jew, and frankly, in the olden days, everyone would have a beard, and they're shaving their beards, and they were changing their Jewish garb, and they're leaving the shtetl, so give me something that I can latch onto. So look what he says. He says, Torah is the completion of all those created. Okay. And according to how the person feels lacking in their own eyes, if you feel lacking, and you look forward to completion, you want to be more complete, you want to be more whole, then you merit the acceptance of the Torah. On Shavuos, you can get the Kabbalah HaTorah. And it's very hard for one of free choice, a person who has all this free choice, to seem fully lacking in your own eyes, right? How are you supposed to feel you're lacking? What do you mean? I have free will, I can do whatever I want. Well, I'm not lacking, I'm the master of my own kingdom. But one who makes himself like a midbar, we're talking about Parshas Bamidbar, it's right before Shavuos. You make a midbar, it's the holiday, it's the parsha about the Jews in the desert, so you make yourself like a desert. You have to say to yourself, I am lacking. I'm like a desert, I'm lacking things. This is the preparation of the children of Israel before they got the Torah. Before they got the Torah, they were in the midbar, they were in the desert. So they realized they were a desert. It's a metaphor. And they got the Torah this is the preparation of the children of Israel before they got the Torah to come to the aspect. There's a word, bechina, I don't know how to translate it. Aspect, concept, idea. To come to the concept of desert. Their goal was to be like a desert. This is similar to a Hasidic or mystical notion of, isbatlus, of making yourself into nothing. But he doesn't go that far in this paragraph. It's not making yourself nothing, but realize that you're lacking. To be clear in their eyes, and to make this happen for all creatures, they should long for completion. So you want it to be clear in your eyes, and then maybe that kind of spreads out to everybody else. We're going to get back to that later. The idea that what you do in your heart, that can have ripple effects to everybody. So you get it clear in your eyes, then you could accept the Torah when you realize that you're lacking something. But I want to claim that this is actually giving everyone in the crowd a formula for a bare minimum. What's the bare minimum? Sounds like a high goal. I mean, you have to think of yourself as nothing, or that you're lacking. It's very hard to think you're nothing lacking. He says, what would be the goal in one word?
One word? I don't know.
Desert, maybe, as a metaphor word. Mm-hmm.
613.
You have to recognize that you're incomplete. Good. I think what we have here, maybe I'm influenced by a recent passing of one of my rabbis, Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, Zichrono Livracha, but the idea of she'ifa, of longing. That if you could just long for completion, he says, he's saying, Tyra Yidden, my dear Jews, if you just long for completion, just realize that you're lacking something, that the Torah could add something to you. All right, now we're getting into something kind of a current idea. People are feeling like they're not lacking anything. They're lacking a lot of things. See you later, Rabbi. I'm going to go down to the bar down the block or the salon where they'll discuss all the recent, artwork in Paris or something, right? That's what I'm lacking. He says, no, Jew, you're lacking something. You need the Torah. But if you realize you're lacking, then you can come to shleimus. If you make yourself a midbar, not in the total sense, but that you're lacking something, then you're ready to go. Or, so you made it a little easier for the regular Jew that he just has to realize he's missing something, and then he's already halfway there. Then there's an idea of the connection to the Rebbe. Now, of all the Hasidic books, I wouldn't, obviously the idea of a Hasidic Rebbe and that the Hasidic Rebbe can do it better than you can, and that you kind of need the Rebbe. I mean, that's the basis of everybody coming to the Rebbe. So, yes. On the other hand, he's not infatuated with the idea of the Rebbe like in the writings of Rabbi Elimelech or the early Hasidim, the Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. You're going to find that's like a central idea. They keep harping on that idea that everything goes through the Rebbe, and through the Rebbe you get to the God, and that type of thing. I think this is sort of that light, in a light sense. Listen to this. And my teacher and Rebbe, honored master, father, grandfather of blessed memory, talking about the Chidush Yarim, the round book over there, said in the name of the Rav Zal of Parshasicha, whatever how you pronounce that, Pshischa, right? He said, who was that? That was Rabbi of Bunim. That was the Rabbi, his grandfather's Rabbi, who was a pharmacist, had a little different view. An explanation of what it says: a person should always say, when will my deeds reach the deeds of my ancestors? This is not his idea. This is a famous Jewish statement that a person should always say, when can my deeds reach the level of the deeds of my ancestors? Who? Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So it's again, idea of longing. We should long for our ancestors. For who is such a fool to think he's like his holy ancestors? Right? Nobody. Right? Now today, right, everybody thinks they're better than their ancestors, and the kids are 12 years old tell you what to do. But in those days, they still had the idea that the Alter Rebbe, he knew something, and the old man looked like an old man, and they venerated him. And so nobody thinks that they can be. So what do you mean? How can you long to be like your ancestors? You can't get to your ancestors. Rather, it means they should not separate himself, and he should have a touching and a grasping of the deeds of his ancestors. He says, Tyra Eden, dear Jews, touch the Rebbe, right? He doesn't mean physically. He's not one of those type of Rebbes, but come to the gathering where the Rebbe's Tish when he's talking. Do some deed that's connected with touch, Shabbos, something where you're connected with the deeds of the ancestors, and then you can touch. You're not going to reach it, but you could touch it. In Hebrew, matai yagiu, when will they reach, is also like touch. This rabbi who was analyzing the Sefat Emet in the Talmud, and Sefat Emet here in the Chumash, he said that he tends to take an approach of until that. The word until means it's a process toward, but not getting all the way there. Anyway, and because of this, you'll be able to touch their roots, even if it requires some jumping. There's a Hasidic idea and a mystical idea that you can't always jump. I mean, we need to go step after step. You try to jump, it's no good. Well, you have to do some jumping. To get to your ancestors, you got to do some jumping, but you just want to touch their roots. And the roots means, we're going to see later, they're the purest element of their neshama, the idea that the real essence of what people are, not the mirage of what we see. And we'll get back to that later. And that's our next point. Torah. So our first point was that a Jew can touch his ancestors with the bare minimum just by longing, by realizing that he's lacking, by connecting a little bit, touching the deeds, grasping the deeds of their ancestors, just a little bit, and that's a start. To have a negia va'achiza, negia, touching, just a touch, and achiza, some sort of grasp, like you grasp the ankle of Jacob, the ankle of Esau, just touching a little bit, that's enough of a connection to the Rebbe. Now we move to another idea, which, frankly, this is what separates me from the Sefat Emet. I don't really accept this idea. I think it's a beautiful idea. Many people use it. Even Rabbi Soloveitchik uses this type of idea. But it's a little bit too pantheistic for me. And I can't accept it. But I think you can take the kernel of the idea without its Kabbalistic and pantheistic sort of idea, and you can see something very beautiful. And we can't discuss the Sefat Emet without mentioning it because it's a very prevalent idea within his writings. And if you want more about it, there's a letter that he wrote in one of his Michtavim. They have collections of letters, and the letter is cited here in English. A letter he wrote where he says, "I'm really going to tell you what I really think about this topic." Okay, let's read it. For the Torah is the life force of everything. As it says, the Torah, the Holy One, blessed be, created the world. So if God created the world with the Torah, it's not just as a blueprint for the Torah, but the Torah therefore is in everything because the Torah was created with, let's say, the building blocks of the Torah, with letters or what. But simply enclosed with it, he enclosed it with the light of the Torah. So you've got the world, but it has the light of the Torah all around it, in all of creation. And it turns out that the whole world is a name of the Torah. The whole world is, really the Torah itself is like names of God, and the whole world is a name of the Torah. Is one of the names of God in the Torah. As it says, the Lord is one, and His name is one. And what does that mean? If you look in this letter over here, it means that there's only God. The idea that there's you and you and you and me and this room and the chair, it's all an illusion. It's all God. Something like yes. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
A little Buddhism.
Yes. Yes, he says the real meaning of God is, it's not that God is one as in the only one, as opposed to the foolish pagans who think that there are two, but God is one, meaning there's only God. And that's why you close your eyes, because when you close your eyes, it's all one big thing. This is a very Hasidic idea. He's a big adherent of it, but listen to where it takes you. And so, one who learns Torah for its sake, what do you mean? There's the concept of learning Torah for its sake. What does that mean? He said, I'll tell you, nobody knows what it means, so he has one interpretation. To bring light and life of the Torah to everything. You know what the purpose of Torah is? It's not so you should be smart, or you should do the mitzvahs. That's too instrumental. The Torah is for its own sake. What's that? To bring the light and life of Torah to everything. In other words, if you eat a piece of kugel on Shabbos, you brought life to the kugel. If you make kiddush on wine, you brought life to the grapes. If you say Torah on your table, you brought life to the table. If you have a base medrash, you bring life to the wood and the beams and everything, or to the city where the Torah is being taught. The Torah lights up for him in everything, and he can see the light of Torah in everything. So, now, while I can't accept the idea that, I prefer the idea that God takes a deep breath and we live outside of God and we have to find Him, but the idea that we can see the light of Torah in everything, that's a soundbite. Who can disagree with that, right? Yes?
Is it possible, or should anybody try to reconcile that belief with, like, let's say, Maimonides' philosophy?
I think it will be difficult. I'm very influenced by one lecture I once heard from Rabbi Chait, who said that, God can't be in everything. That means you can't have parts of God in different things. He would say that God's in everything. God is everything. So, but I think it will be very difficult. It will be very difficult philosophically to reckon for this. He would say, I'm not a philosopher, I'm a mystic, I'm using the Zohar. And anyway, so he takes this very seriously. Yes.
He sees God in everybody?
Right. That's the beauty of it. Right. That's the beauty of it. Right. But it's, right. But the problem is, so then, I don't know, a tree and a stick and a rock, and it's all, yeah. Well, no, the God's in everything. Right. So I prefer the idea that God is potentially in everything, right? That He's in the kugel, in the noodles, if I eat them on Shabbos. Yes?
It's more of Rabbi Akiva's in philosophy. God is immanent, but Rabbi Yishmael, God is transcendent. That Rabbi Akiva was, God is in everything here.
Imminent.
He sees it, God in everything.
Yeah, the theory that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel have deep philosophical disagreements is itself a matter of controversy. But I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Whether if it's Rabbi Akiva, yes.
Somewhere told me that the idea that his name is one that God's name is the whole Torah.
Right. The entire Torah just mixed up names of God. The whole Torah is just the name of God. Right. So and the world's created from the names. So the name of God is in everything. Right. And basically God is in everything. Right. Moving along. Now, another similar idea in Shavuot. I'm sorry, I missed a typo there. 1877. The Torah in front of us is the outer garment of the Torah. Now, don't be fooled by the stories about Abraham and Isaac. That's the outer stuff. And by engaging in it, we stir up the inner aspect of it. You engage in it, and all of a sudden you find the inner stuff. And this is the main power given to the children of Israel. And he believes that as Jews, we have a special power to uncover that within the Torah. And we can stir up the roots of the Torah, with the real Torah there, the pneumius, the innerness of it. And the soul of a person is also like this. Similarly, when it comes to the soul, you can also stir up the inner part of your soul. That it is a garment for the power of the soul. I'm not sure that let's say, which is a portion from God above. This concept appears many places. We'd have to do a whole history of who was the first one to come up with this idea that you have a portion from God above in you. I don't think he was the first one, not the last one, but it's a very big idea within his writings. Okay. So, taking it for what it is, it's interesting. Next. Spiritual seeking. We have more to say, so yes?
I heard one, the black letters of the Torah, not the Torah, it's the white spaces.
Right. The Torah was written black letters on white fire, or black fire on white fire. Right. So
the letters are really the white part, and the black are not. They're just the spaces.
The space in between is also something. Right. There's another idea that the way we read the Torah is only the way we read it now. But if we really had better vision, like dyslexic people, we could put it together in new and exciting other ways. In any event. And now, going back to the idea that that every Jew can sort of find something, listen to this: the idea of finding something for the spiritual seeker. Go to the next page. All that which His glory and His holiness is hidden in this world. The fact that God's glory is hidden, it's for the purpose of man. We need that. For if He would be revealed, if you could see the greatness of man, then all the work would be annulled. You'd say, like, well, what do you need your mitzvahs for? Just look at that. We're watching the movie of God and His greatness. What do you need your worship for? You don't need that. So, and also, I would feel like I was nothing. I'd feel like I couldn't do any worship. I'm too busy with the great celestial field. So what about the tzaddik? The tzaddik is aware. He has a full hiskalus. He is fully aware of that which is hidden to everyone else, of all the great celestial realms, like Rabbi Akiva. So then, if you're up in the heavens, so then how do you worship? In other words, if God does us a favor because He can't have the full revelation and also do you worship, well, wait a second. Don't we believe that there are great ones, Hasidic masters and others, who do see the full revelation and they still worship? So how does it work? The tzaddik, in worship of Hashem Yisbarach, can do his own even though he sees the glory. He's able to do both. And so one who is ready for this is shown to him all that which is the upper world. In other words, if you're ready to continue your worship and still see the great glory, then we'll let you see the great glory even though you'll let you'll be able to continue worship. We'll let you see the great glory, and we're not afraid that it's going to ruin your worship. Now, on Wikipedia, someone transcribed this in other words, and I think they saw this as a statement that you might think that, let's say, the super holy types, their worship is, you might be intimidated by that kind of worship, which is like so super holy, and you feel like, how am I supposed to worship? There's all that holy stuff. And this is somehow telling the simple Jew that it's okay. You don't need to go to all that holy stuff. It's better. You shouldn't see all that stuff. Maybe this is part of the Kutzker idea that we shouldn't get involved with that super holy stuff. If we saw that, we'd be lost. We have to. So there may be again a point for the layman, for this for the simple man, but it's okay that we're not seeing all the great glories. So I have to think about that. Yes. Okay. Yes.
That's like the story of the rabbi who supposedly wrote the Zohar after he left the cave and he saw like a stack of wheat or something. It would burst into flames.
Right. He couldn't. Right. The Rosh Bar Yochai could not. Couldn't live with the at that point with the revealed world and the hidden world all at the same time. Right. But in many places he says that our goal is not. It's not just to live in the heavens. We very much have to do action on earth. Chesed, that's the Kutzker Rebbe. So we live in the era not of Torah, not of Avodah, but of Chesed and of work. And you got to bring it out into work. That's what the Book of Ruth we'll see is about, because you take the concepts of Torah and you bring it out. You got to get this girl married. You got to do kindness. You got to give her wheat. You got to do stuff. Torah is about doing. So a very sort of modern idea there. It doesn't sound like cloistered yeshiva bacher type of attitude. So it's interesting. Okay. Then if we, going back to the previous point, if we believe that there's holiness everywhere, then of course, and the Rav Kook, we're going to read about later in the coming weeks, is also big on these sparks. There must be sparks of holiness that are hidden in different places. So let's take a look at Bamidbar 1872. That is what it means. I have tried and I have succeeded. Talmud in Tainit, I think, says that, or I always forget, Tainit or Megillah, says that if someone says I tried but I failed, don't believe him. But if he says, or I failed but I tried but I failed, or I didn't try and I succeeded, don't believe him. But if he says I tried and I succeeded, then you should believe him. So he says, what does that mean? He says, that is what it means to find the life quality in your essence. You have to try. What do you have to try to do? You have to find the life quality, the chiyus, that quality of life meaning the essence of life, in your essence, which is not missing anything. You have to get to that point that's not missing anything. This is interesting. Before we talked about feeling you're not missing anything, there's some point in you that's not missing anything. And every person in Israel has holiness, kedusha of infinite value, and they must simply take off the shells which cover the truth. Shells is a Kabbalistic term, which cover the truth. But he puts it in a very simple language. That's the Sefat Emet. That's the beauty of it. He's using a word like klipa, which is a technical term for the shards and the things that are not part of holiness. And yet, a sentence reads very well. Rak la'asira klipotas ovim chasim ha'emet. You should take away the shells that cover the truth. I don't need to know Kabbalah to understand that. I understand it. I want to get to the essence of who I am. So before we said that every person should realize that they're missing. But if you can get to the root of your neshama, then you get to the part that's not missing anything. You get to something that's really not longing. Right? A lot of modern writers will talk about, aren't you missing something? A lot of modern preachers, don't you feel like you're missing something in your life? Well, Torah is gonna solve that problem. And this is the same idea, that you can get to that point. It's not missing anything. Doesn't need another shopping spree or something to satisfy it. It's whole. Okay. Now, once we say that the Jew can, we have to find holiness in different places, gets to an interesting implication in terms of the Gentiles and the converts and things like that. Let's take a look. Shavuos 1885, with the starting words, Be'inyan. The Midrash says, Hashem is my strength. What does that mean? It says in the prophets that Hashem is my strength, and to you nations will come. That's the verse. I think it's Isaiah. Hashem uzi ma'uzi, elecha goyim yavo. Nations will come to you. For through the Torah, the children of Israel take out the holy sparks, which are found among the nations. The nations come to you and they say, hey, I want to convert. And in that way, we bring out the holy sparks. Right? That fellow who's converted, he thought he was a Gentile. No, he has a holy spark and he's going to become part of the holiness. As in the giving of the written Torah, through which Yitro is brought close. In other words, when the children of Israel take out the holy sparks, when there's the writing of the Torah, all of a sudden Yitro comes. The story of Yitro is right next to the giving of the Torah. And like the oral Torah, through which Ruth and David were brought close, who is the root of the oral Torah. David is associated with prayer. We'll talk about prayer later, but also the oral Torah. Why? The oral Torah, because he was born through Ruth. And Ruth, according to the Torah, Ruth is not Jewish. You can't marry Ruth. You can't be. How can you be the king? You can't even marry Ruth because she's a Moabite. But through the oral Torah, we say you can marry Moabite women, just you can't marry the men. So David's existence as a Jew depended on oral interpretation. So David is the oral Torah. There's a lot of associations there, but David's the oral Torah. And when the written Torah was given, Jethro pops up. Surprise. When the oral Torah, David is the expression of the oral Torah in action, back to the action point, the oral Torah in action comes through David. It's the expression of oral Torah. So then, when he pops up, all of a sudden, there's a convert called Ruth, and she converts to Judaism because when the Jews reach their essence, it brings the sparks of holiness from other places. In 1899, he said that if we don't do this in Israel, we're supposed to be able to do it in Israel, and the nations come to us with their sparks. But if we're doing a bad job, we're not marketing well, nobody's coming to Israel, and the sparks are just sitting there in Algeria, someplace, and they're not getting into Israel. So then he said, I'll send you to Algeria. And you'll go to Algeria, and you'll meet a boy will meet girl, or whatever happens there, and we'll find those sparks someplace else. Now, there is apparently, I don't know much about it, there is, according to some readings I was reading, there is a relationship between his writings and Chabad. Chabad is also part of that Kutzker type of idea that Chabad, what does Chabad stand for? Chachma bina v'das, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, that they were trying to shed the earlier Hasidic idea, which was sort of unlearned, uncouth, and we're trying to be more part of the learned world, and yes, would see the holiness in every Jew around them, and absolutely. But it's a mission even extends beyond the Jewish people. Now, okay, so along these lines, once we understand that the ultimate thing is to come back to your root, you can understand that later on in Parshat Naso, when you have the priestly blessings, he's blessing you. He says, if you cut through everything else, what's the blessing of the priest? To bring you back to your root. Now, the blessing is not to give you new stuff, it's just to make you yourself, to be yourself. Again, it's all reducible to a soundbite of some sort.
Does this mean that you give a rechacha?
Right. That's it. Well, I didn't see this full vort. I just thought I would share that snippet with you. But just going off on my own a little bit on this, you could say, what's Baruch? God is I don't blessing God for the apple. I can't make God blessed. He is blessed. So all I'm saying is that he is blessed the way he's blessed. Maybe when the Kohen gives you a blessing, he's doing the same thing. He says, Yivarecha, not that he should transform you and like the Hasidic Rebbe he's gonna give you all kinds of new blessings or something. Nah, he doesn't need to shower you with anything from above or anything. What do you mean? Just all he has to do is bring out the blessing that you are. It's almost parallel to the blessing of God. Okay. Yes. Well,
they can't bless you. God can bless you.
Sorry?
God can bless you, but they can't bless you.
The priest can't, but right. Well, they're clearly ani avarchim. Right. It says clearly that God does the blessing. Yeah. Ani avarchim. You put the name on the Jewish people, and I will bless them. God will bless them. Now, moving along. Now, on another thought, as a light mystic, again, he's not a deep mystic in the sense that he doesn't talk that much about the Sfirot, the 10 emanations and all that. He's not so interested in sort of technical Kabbalah. He's interested in Kabbalah that relates to psychology and human existence. And that's why wasn't it in the 90s when people were getting more spiritual, all of a sudden everybody's studying Sefat Emet? Because they could see. It's just right there for the taking. Everybody could take it and enjoy something from it. And he was trying to write like that. Somebody once wrote a commentary on the Sefat Emet to try to bring out all the Kabbalistic meanings, because there's a lot of references to the Zohar and Kabbalah, to try to flesh out all that part of the Sefat Emet. And one of his students or relatives said, "Don't do that. This is the whole beauty of it, is that it's readable for everybody. let the Kabbalistic part be, left enshrouded where it is. It's supposed to be Sefat Emet, just the truth on the tongue. Moving along. As a mystic, he often tries to take it to a new level. And this was one of my first years when I've been studying the Sefat Emet for about 15 years now. My Sefat Emet is marked up. Every week I have the key lines underlined. I have a lot of markings in there. And one thing that was exciting about it was, instead of saying, Sukkot, you remember, that our ancestors were in Sukkot and the protection of God, and all this sort of, Pesach, you went out of Egypt, and Shavuos, you got the Torah, all these sort of surface kind of things. He always, like any good mystic, wants to take it to the next level or 3 levels higher. It's all about mysticism. Now, why do they say you shouldn't study mysticism until you're 40? Because mysticism really, at its deepest level, it's about union with God. And it gets kind of very, how shall we say, it gets into uniting with God in almost a physical kind of way, and a lot of sexual imagery comes forth. And therefore, all the holidays, that's what they're about. But then, in a very gentle kind of way. He says, Chag HaSukkot, you know what Sukkot is? Sukkot is the Bechina of Aaron. Sukkot is like Aaron. And what does Aaron do? Aaron is the one who comes into the inner chamber. Heviani HaMelech Hadarab. He quotes the verse from Song of Songs, which is all about mystical union, that the king has brought me into his chambers. You know what Sukkot is? You go in a sukkah, you're not going in a booth that the Jews lived in the desert. No, that's so surface. We're so superficial. No, it's the inner chamber of God, like as in bed chamber, as in, right, place of union. But still, what is more significant is the end of that verse. The king brought me in his chambers, and I will rejoice and be glad with you. Which I believe is a reflection of that which takes place in a bedroom. And that's Bach. How will it take place? I will rejoice with you. You is Bach. Bach is the letter Beis and Chaf. That's 22 in Gematria, which is the number of letters in the Hebrew alphabet. This is the number of letters in the Torah. So the ultimate rejoicing, the union of God and the Jewish people, is through Bach. When you study the letters of the Torah, it's the ultimate union. Which is more precious than, how do you go here? Than pearls. And anything, and includes everything. It includes everything. So Shavuos is a time of the great rejoicing. Sukkos is one thing, but this is I don't know. I have to double check that. Shavuos. I don't know where Shavuos fits in, but anyway, in other words, Sukkot is very nice. You go into the inner chamber, but the second half of the verse is Shavuos. That's when you rejoice with the words. That's better, because going in the chamber, that's cute, but to rejoice, that's the higher level, and that's Shavuos. Even though they're a little out of order, but you have to look more carefully at that passage. Okay, moving along, losing myself in these sheets here. Where are we? Let's see. Yes. Now, we're going to learn some interesting things about his thinking in general from looking at how he relates to tshuva, tefillah, and Torah, and how they relate to each other. Shavuos 1883. The main teshuva is to Torah. Now, right, if that's ever a Kutzker type of statement, usually you say teshuva, repentance, is about getting close to God. It should be about what we were talking about before, mystic union. It's about, teshuva means to return and repent. To where? To God. How? Teshuva, tefillah, tzedakah. It doesn't talk about Torah. He says, no, the main teshuva is Torah. He says, how do we know it? We say it every day in our prayers. Hashivenu avinu l'Torah techa. Restore us, our Father, to our Torah. So that's teshuva. So in other words, it's a very non-Hasidic idea. It's a Kutzker idea. Torah, don't think prayer is going to get you there. Torah is the way to get there. And of course, this is a big problem with American Judaism. It's all synagogue-based, it's all prayer-based. It should be Torah-based. Hopefully we can correct that. For all prayer which comes through Torah is accepted. That prayer itself is better when it comes through Torah. As it says in the Gemara, that the ideal is to stand and feel out of the words of Torah. Why do we say Ashrei first? Why do we say the Shema first and then we pray? We say the Shema and Esrei, the Amidah, the silent devotion after Shema, after the Ashrei. Why?
those things are from the Torah.
Torah, you say something from the Torah or Tanakh, then you could launch into your prayer. It is a propitious time for tefillah of the heart when you've already learned, and this is hinted in the Megillah of Ruth with the birth of King David of blessed memory, who is the root of prayer. Now, before he was the root of the oral Torah, now he's the root of prayer. Because after all, David is the Im Zmirot Yisrael. He's the ultimate sweet singer of Israel. So David represents prayer, which we read on Shavuot. But the book of Ruth is about David, which we read on Shavuos, which is the holiday of Torah, to emphasize the connection of Torah and tefillah.
But, Rabbi, couldn't you also argue that we're supposed to say a particular baracha before we start studying the Torah?
Yeah, and therefore?
You
mean that's...
could argue that therefore prayer is supposed to be primary, comes before Torah. Instead of saying, he's saying, you say the Shema before the Shemona Esrei, that means Torah comes first. But you say certain prayers, the prayer of the Torah before the Shema and stuff like that.
There are, right. One of the first things that we do say in the morning, is a blessing over the soul, that's true, or the bathroom blessing. But one of the early blessings in the morning is the Birkat Torah, the blessing. So it is connected to Torah. The blessings over Torah is a type of Torah too. But I wouldn't say the precedence. He's just saying, all he's saying here is that it's enhanced, that prayer is at its best when it's connected to Torah. And that's why in Shavuos you want to have the book of Ruth, which represents prayer on a holiday of Torah. That's great. And also, based on what we said before, what the Rabbi said before, David is Torah and David is prayer, so he brings together. You read Ruth, you're learning about Torah and prayer all together. Okay, good. Now, so I think you can see a lot about his idea of the supremacy of Torah. It enhances tefillah. It is teshuvah, right? So you would think a Hasidic Rebbe would emphasize teshuvah and tefillah, and Torah would be kind of on the side. No, this is the Kotzker school, Rebbe of Sicha school, of Simcha Bunim. It's different. Okay. Then, if you wonder, when does he talk about what's going on? Well, in the book, he never digresses into politics, okay? But clearly, there are times when you can see a hint of whom he's talking to. So, if we look here on 1875 Shavuos, it says, why were the Ten Commandments given in singular? The answer is to give an opening to Moshe regarding the golden calf. You see, when the Jews did the golden calf, the Midrash says that the Jews could say, Moshe could say, look, the Jews didn't have to observe monotheism. You only told the Ten Commandments to me. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Lord your God, singular. So that's why it's in singular. That's what the Midrash says. It seems that the Ten Commandments, were given in a way that commandments could exist even in a generation which was wholly obligated, wholly sinful. It's the idea that the generation before the Mashiach comes is going to be wholly obligated or sinful. Where most of Israel is not good, only one person, it can maintain these commandments. And with this power, the Torah exists in Israel, and this is an opening to explain how the Torah still exists in Israel. Who is it? How does the Torah exist today? Who's that? The Hasidic Rebbe. Whoever it is. It may happen to be him. It's not holiness. It could be him. Before him, it was his grandfather. Before that, it was Alexander Rebbe. Whoever it is. The one Rebbe, so this is a very Hasidic idea, but it's also a normative idea because it's talking about Moshe. The Medrash was talking about Moshe. But he's turning to the Jews of that time and they're saying, this is not the way it used to be. I mean, people are violating Shabbos like right and left over here. This is, they remembered when it wasn't like that. And you could see Judaism was flying out the window. And they said, it's all right. If you got one Jew doing the right thing, Torah will continue to exist. And look at this man. He founded a group of Hasidim that had hundreds of thousands of people before the war. And today, they're 20,000 strong, and I'm sure if you do the geometric proportions, they'll be back to 100,000 in no time. But in any event, we move on. Then there's the idea of new Torah. Now, I mentioned Rabbi Lichtenstein before. This has been a controversial thing about the Sefat Emet, that does he believe that there's sort of new Torah every day? Well, as I said, he's a very nuanced person. He's always thinking of new ideas. Now, these new ideas are within a certain frame. I mean, within the frame of things that have been written in Kabbalah, in Torah, in Medrash, in Talmud. I mean, he's in that frame. But is he suggesting an idea that there's new ideas all the time? That the Torah is still being given all the time? Because he has this idea called ha'ara, that the ideas of Torah are continue to be revealed all the time. So that's why it's called Shavuos. Is also the holiday of bikurim, of first fruits, because it's always renewing itself. Torah is always renewing itself. So that's the connection between the first fruits and the idea of bikurim. Okay, so again, one of the ideas that I believe it does originate with the Sefat Emet is the idea that all holidays have the shadow cast from the original holiday, and they continue to carry that power. The power of miracles is inherent in every day of Hanukkah. The power of turning things around is inherent every year on in the very essence of the day of Purim. The idea of hischadshus, of bikurim, of first fruits, of newness, of renewal, is inherent in Shavuos. It's in the air, if you can tap into it. According to the level which you tap into Torah, you can tap into that light. So look what he says, the Torah, which is above the sun, right? Because under the sun there's nothing new. But the Torah is above the sun. It has a renewal always. It's not. There is something new. When it comes to Torah, since it's above the sun, it's not under the sun. Under the sun, there's nothing new, as it says in Ecclesiastes. But above the sun, there's a renewal always, and it cannot get old. Now this relates to his idea of chidush, because he's always coming up with new ideas. He's just brilliant. So too, the days of the giving of Torah renew themselves every year, and it's called the day of Bikurim, the first fruits. Or the other idea, he says, that's why it's called the first fruit day, because it's always the gate of newness and renewal is always open, so that's a very important idea, is the aura of a holiday. Finally, a beautiful idea that he shares here, as a person could become a Torah. It's not his idea. There's an idea that, let's say, you put the Torah next to a coffin and you say, this person fulfilled everything that's in this Torah over here. So there's an idea, person is a Torah, that's why it's written on parchment. It's sort of like a person. But look what the way he expresses it. Regarding the Megillah of Ruth on Shavuos, this is a totally new idea. Regarding the Megillah of Ruth on Shavuos, it's to show the power of partnership with God that the children of Israel have in the Torah of Hashem. As we can partner with God in the making of the Torah. This is a radical idea. How from the actions of a person, a book and of Megillah in the Torah of Hashem is made. Right? Somebody decided to be nice to his cousin, decided to marry her, decided to give her some wheat, and those decisions at the human level became Torah. And he's claiming that we can all create Torah every day. Now, if you take this radically, so you make a new Torah, you may come up with new rules. But if you take this normatively, it means within the realm of Torah, chidushim, doing more mitzvos, like Boaz and Ruth and Naomi. They didn't do anything new that was forbidden, right? I mean, they came up with a new insight in the Torah, the oral Torah, about who you can marry, but there's nothing forbidden. They're just carrying out the Torah, and we could write another chapter in the Torah. There is a midrash that one day there will be a book of redemption, and we hope will be written in it, right? Unfortunately, we in America, we're less likely to be in the book than the people in Israel, but who knows? But keeping the Torah going, our studies here, that could also be in the book. Yes?
You becoming a living Torah? Is that what he's...
And you actually write a new chapter in the Torah too. That's what's radical. You actually write a new chapter. Yeah. Right. So all his ideas could sort of blow your mind if you really took them deeply. Now, then I saw an interesting article, some other interesting themes. Derech Eretz, the relationship of midos to Torah, the relationship of character building in Torah. There's an expression that character comes before Torah. And that's why we build up our midos, the 49 days of preparation. We're building up before we get out of Egypt. Egypt had us on a very low level character-wise. We're building up the character to get to Torah. The Kotzker Rabbi said there was an era of Torah, and then there was the Hasidic era of prayer, and now we're in the era of kindness. But and kindness relates to building your character, and the character comes before Torah. But even the importance of derech eretz as work also comes out in his writings, because after the sin of the Garden of Eden, we were not sent out of the garden like get out of here, but sent on a mission. That the Holy One sent us to fix the lower world, and the power of connection which we had in Gan Eden. How do we fix it? What are the tools? You saw Gan Eden. Man saw Gan Eden. That gives you the power to connect. And that is, but I didn't see Gan Eden. He says, no, before you're born, everybody sees Gan Eden and the Torah. And with that power, you already saw it, you can fix the world. And so beautiful. And then, if you wonder, well, he's a Bissell Kabbalist, so what does he say about Tikkun Olam? Tikkun. He says, well, the opposite of what everyone says about Tikkun Olam. Uvitikun atzmo metaken kol habriya. You want to fix the whole world? Fix yourself. With the fixing of the self, you fix the whole world. Right. And finally, the idea of action being important, relating to the idea of work. The reading on Shavuot shows that the main thing is not study, but action. It's a very radical statement. I mean, that statement is an old saying, Lo midrash yikar ala maseh. But the way it's used here, it's sort of radical. It's not the learning that's most important. It's the doing, and that's a major debate in the Talmud. And he's taking a stand. And what I want to do, yes.
How does the reading of that on Shavuot show that the importance of action as opposed?
Yes, that's Ruth. That he redeemed his cousin and all. So we talked about the idea that the Rebbe gives us encouragement that if we could just long for the Rebbe, if we could connect with the Rebbe, if we could long for something that's missing within us, if we could long for that part of us what's not missing anything, and we have to recognize that Torah is in everything. There's beauty, there's Torah, there's God in everything in the world. That's absolutely everything. Inanimate objects, animate objects. Gentiles have sparks too. We have to go find them. And there's an idea that we have to take those sparks out. There's an idea that when we get connected with the Torah, the nations come to us, the sparks come, they are naturally attracted to us. Otherwise, we have to go to them. We skip the idea that everyone has a place, everything has its own place. You have your own role, your own essence. Just like each tribe has its own place, so too your root, your sublime root of your soul, has its own place. We talked about the idea of the mystic union, and that by studying Torah, we're the ultimate connection with God. We talked about the ultimate teshuvah is Torah, the ultimate prayer is through Torah. We talked about the idea that one person could save the whole generation, continue the Torah. Talked about the illumination of the past shines on the calendar. All the various events of the past shine on the current calendar. We talked about the idea of chidush, that Shavuos speaks of a certain type of renewal and first fruits that we can bring, and it inspires us for the entire year to get new ideas and new thoughts. We talked about the idea of the importance of character building as a precursor to Torah, and the idea that you need to do that. We can't just stay in that sublime realm. We need to come down and do the work. We're on a mission. We're here to do that. We have no choice but to do that. We've been shown the Gan Eden. We've been shown the Torah, and we just need to bring it to this world. And by fixing ourselves, fix the whole world. And the main thing is to do action. Now, so these are some major ideas that appear in the Sefat Emet in different places. But you can't walk away from here until one more thing. Would you have 7 more minutes? Okay. 6. Okay. Now, we looked at snippets of things to get different major ideas from different little things that he said. I said in general he's not long anyway. I only cut out 1 or 2, 3 or 4 sentences from each snippet that I gave you. I cut out 4 other sentences. He's not that long. So here's a fuller snippet in order to appreciate that he's the ultimate connector. In each little passage, which consists of a paragraph or two, in each one of those paragraphs, he connects. It seems from my little research I've done, tends to connect about 13 different things in each paragraph. That's part of his idea of chidush. Is not necessarily a new idea. You may have found some of the ideas today new, but also connect things. And that you can imagine his audience, they're all They went to Cheder, they all know the sort of famous Jewish sayings and stuff like that. And he connects 10 or 12 famous sayings that you happen to know with each other, and everyone's going, ooh, ah, and they're coming back on the trains to come to next Yontif before Yontif, to come and hear some more, because he's connecting all these things. Now, what do they actually sound like? Who knows? It probably went on for hours, and all we've got is a couple of paragraphs. So we don't know. But here's one particular homily. It's about Shavuos. Let's see the 13 things he connects. Are we ready? Listen to this. Regarding the reading the Megillah of Ruth on Shavuos, so number one, he's going to connect the idea of Ruth. The day that King David of blessed memory was born. Why we read the Megillah on the day that King David was born. So we're going to try to connect Ruth, Shavuos, and King David. That's 2 or 3 ideas. I heard from my teacher and grandfather Zal, that's the Chidush Yarim, that the 2 bread, the main sacrifice, it's unique to Shavuos, is 2 loaves of bread. Not matzah, usually sacrifices are matzah. This is one exception. Bread, as opposed to Pesach. So why 2 bread offered on Shavuos? This is the 3rd idea we're going to connect. Hint to the aspects of Torah and Tefillah. We mentioned before, there's Torah and there's Tefillah. That we want to get into that on Shavuos. Those are the 2 gifts we give to God. We're going to connect those 4 things. Therefore, we must connect the aspect of prayer, which is an aspect of King David. King David wrote the Psalms, so he's into prayer, to the aspect of Torah. So we've got to connect prayer and Torah. For it says, when you, Moshe, take the nation from Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. He says, wait a second. God's talking to Moses at the burning bush. He says, you're going to worship God on this mountain. They're not going to worship God on the mountain. They're going to get the Torah on the mountain. So what do we see? We see that Torah is worship. Torah and prayer are the same thing. As it says, know the God of your fathers and worship him. So we see that they're connected. Knowing God, which is Torah, and worshiping him, they're connected. Why? Because since when you merit to have knowledge, it's Torah, you come to the true worship, which is prayer. Worship of the heart. In the heart, maybe you have wisdom in the heart. And once they achieve complete knowledge, with the receipt of the Torah, they were subjugated to him with a whole heart. So that's the ultimate goal, is to be subjugated to him, which is a form of worship also. And so too, you should always pray from in the context of words of Torah. As we mentioned before, the Gemara says that you should get up to pray after words of Torah. So we connect that idea, number 8, that idea in the Talmud with this. And it says Hashem is close to all who call him. Number 9, this is a verse in the Ashrei, who call him in truth. Call him in truth. Truth is what? Torah. That's the Sefat Emet, the lips of Torah. In truth. The truth is Torah. Number 9. And we can say, this is what the verse means, the nation stood from afar. Now standing is prayer. That's number 10. Because they stood at Sinai, but they were praying at Sinai. So we see that even though they were getting the Torah, they were standing. Standing is prayer. When they stood at Sinai, they were praying because they were standing before God. What is prayer? To stand before God. But they were getting the Torah, but it's also prayer and Torah at the same time. And it's like the idea of, so it's interesting, most of us sit for the Torah reading. Those who stand are really combining what? Torah and prayer. Torah and prayer. And it's like the idea, from afar I saw you. There's a verse in Isaiah, I think it is, that Merachok nirali Hashem. I saw God from afar. But the verse that Hashem is close to all who call him. So I saw God from afar, but God is only close to people who call out when you're close. So he says, it sounds that prayer is an aspect from being far. But we need to put the redemption closer to the prayer. Just like we put the redemption next to the prayer, here is using the expression, it's not just that the prayer is next to it, we have to try to bring the prayer closer to the redemption, the blessing of redemption right before Gal Yisrael, right before Shemona Esrei. We need to bring it closer because really we're far and we want to come closer. That's the idea. For the main prayer is in the time of tzaros. When do you usually pray? When you're in tzaros, when you have problems. But in the times of revelation, when you see everything's clear and it's wonderful and the stars are shining and the heavens are open, so you don't feel like praying. Well, we need to prepare during those times for the bad days. As it says in Ecclesiastes, on a good day be good, and the bad day see. And on the bad day you have to prepare for the good day. And so when you have that revelation, you store up that for the good times. And this can be included in what it says, they stood from afar. Why did the Jews stand from afar at Mount Sinai? They prepared immediately with their prayers. They stood, meaning prayer. They said, we've got to use this moment of revelation for the bad times. They prepared immediately with their prayers an idea for distant generations that are far from God, like ours. Our generation were far, but they already stood and they saw the revelation and they stood from afar. Now, based on what we said before, when you have a revelation, usually you can't do prayer, but they somehow were able to do both. And they used that moment, and that moment in a Hasidic sort of way, their prayer sort of, they believe sort of vicarious, stuff, that Rabbi could do stuff for you. Well, those people then, those avos, those ancestors, they prepared us for a generation that can't pray. They did it for us. Now, that's what he said in I forgot to write what year this is from. In one year, he said that. Now, it all starts with the idea of his Rabbi, his grandfather, that we have two breads, which are Torah and Tefillah. That was his idea. But from that one idea that his Rabbi gave him, look, in all these years, he came up with different ideas based on that. In 1874, he says, it brings together the lechem from the Shamayim and the lechem from the Aretz. It's the written Torah and the oral Torah. It's the giving and the taking of the Torah. There's two comings close. The hearts of the children to God and the God coming close to us. 1877, it's coming closer to Mount, the first is the coming close to Mount Sinai, the experience, and then there's the ability to receive the Torah. In 1883, he says it's Naseh and Ishma. We will do and we will hear. It's those are the two breads. I'm not sure exactly what he says there. Prayer is the idea of hearing, or maybe it's the idea of Torah. Torah is hearing, and prayer is action. I'm not sure. 1884, he says that there's a midrash that God held the Ten Commandments with two handbreadths this way, and Moses held the other half of the Ten Commandments two hands that way. It was like electricity, right, between God and the Jewish people, and Moshe. So how much did he hold? He held it with two hands breadth. That's why we have the two lechem, the two breads. Maybe it's Moses' hands and God's hands, or it's the two tvachim, how much was held. And in 1891, is almost before his death, he says the giving of God to us and the giving which comes through our avoda. Sometimes God just gives us because that's what God does. He's a giver. And sometimes he gives us because we worship. He says, that's such a sweet smelling thing, I'll give you more. The two types of, is the renewal of the congregation, is another idea. The renewal of the congregation and the renewal of the individual. In other words, this is a mind that's so full of new ideas that he takes one idea from his Rebbe, and his whole life he's playing around with it. He's got 16 different ideas of how, and part of his greatness, I think you can see from here, it's not just particular ideas that he had or the sound bites that he had, or the mystical ideas that he could turn into sound bites, which we could turn into psychological points, which could turn into messages for the crowd that's disaffected, but also the brilliance of being able to connect things and to be able to come back to themes over and over again with new other connections. And now we could do a whole other class about what is he doing here. What is this, like a new midrash? I mean, you can't be that creative. This is not. No one ever said that. The two lechem don't represent that. Is there a midrash that says this stuff? What is he doing? Is he going back to the very concept of midrash and making his own? Can you really do that? So one might argue that it's not just it was a nice Dvar Torah. He gave a good speech. It could be that he creates like a primary text, and they say that one of his grand students, the Sefat Emet, really after him, the next person who combined greatness of Torah and greatness of mysticism was the Shemi Shmuel. Better than these books here of his descendants, was a relative of his, the Sefat Emet, and the Sefat Emet Rebbe, who Simon Waxberg from our community, he once saw the Sefat Emet Rebbe, and related to him, I think, also. And so he said on his books, a bookshelf, he had a shelf with all the early commentaries, like the Ramban and Rambam and the Rashi and those things. And then another shelf with the later commentaries, the Keren Orah, the Pnei Yehoshua, and those things. The Sefat Emet he kept on the shelf with the early authorities, even though he was later. Because his power of chidush and of innovation was very audacious. One might say it's part of a general Hasidic trend, but also uniquely his as well. So I hope you get a sense of the ultimate preacher, the ultimate connector, the person who believed in the connection of everything, the holiness and possibility and potential and everything, and a sense of why he created a movement that was one of the greatest Hasidic movements ever.
It's fascinating that so many people, he was so far beyond, that so many people linked to him and could relate to him. I wonder if they could relate to him today.
Well, I'm saying he's very popular today. In other words, I don't like. I didn't show any pictures tonight. I think we would look at a picture. Oh, he's so he would look very old world. But I think he's very current today. It's beyond a small.
Could he recognize
Hasidic
today if he came back?
Well, he saw the spark and everything. He saw the spark and everything. So you'd have to see that. But there's no emphasis here. For instance, right, the Hasidic Rebbe who came from my town. He was the Fristiger Rebbe, Rimanover Rebbe. He was very into the idea of separate garments and things like that. There are certain themes that are missing here in his writings. You don't see emphasis on garments, externals, mimicking the Rebbe. What else? There's a lot of missing themes. There's mischief being done by the missing topics. But
the Sefat Emet is written about, or
no, what he did not write. Right. Right. No, it's a very spiritual message. He's not preaching. I mean, people are dropping. He knows people are dropping Shabbos, but he's not. He's preaching the pneumius of Shabbos. That like the gates can open again on Shabbos. He's not preaching the observance of Shabbos. Obviously, that's his goal. He's a very, very ultra conservative, Hasidic, pious, holy man. So obviously, his goal is mitzvahs like everybody else. But the message is like a very spiritual message. And in the 90s, when spirituality came back, all of a sudden, everybody was reading Sefat Emet. Now, Rabbi Weinberg of the OU, he's a very interesting, well-read man, and he feels like this is inauthentic. How am I a modern Orthodox rabbi? I'm reading the Sefat Emet. What are we doing with the Hasidic Rebbe? It's not that no one's denying his greatness, but to really appreciate the Sefat Emet, you have to live it. You don't read it, you live it. And then we disagree with some of his premises. That's an interesting question of whether we can really connect with it when we don't live it. But what I was reading was that he didn't want people to only be able to get it if they got every Kabbalistic reference and every Midrashic reference. The Midrash is a jumping board, and from there he goes into something that everybody could appreciate, and he wanted everyone to get something out of it.
This was in Poland, right?
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
1905.
Ger is a city. Yeah.
Ger, okay.
Yeah. There's a longer name. There's a second name. Yeah.
Oh, this has nothing to do with the Reform movement that started in Germany, when the people stopped being.
No, but it's interesting. So I don't know his relationship to the non-Orthodox. Obviously, as a member of that good, it would be a fairly negative one. But and don't forget, in Eastern Europe there was no. That's more of a German. Yeah, but obviously that's not his thing. But to the extent that he wanted to be in a secluded city like here, which is more small town, but he would come in to do a tish in Warsaw, and he saw himself as the Rebbe of all the people there, understanding that the people there were as far as could be. Today, to be a Ger Chassid, you have to have the full garb and all that. So, there's a certain look. And I'm sure his inner circle of Chassidim were like that in those days. I have the impression, though, that many people who said they were followers of the Rebbe, that means that they went there for Yontiv, or they went there for a bracha. It wasn't about a look or this. It was whether you were into that Rebbe, that it was your Rebbe. That was the important thing. So I have, I think sometimes we meet Holocaust survivors and they say, yeah, I'm a Gera Chassid, I'm a this kind of Alexander Chassid. It's not about what they look like before the war necessarily. It's more about, where their heart was, which Rabbi their heart was with.
Thank you.
Anyway, thanks for joining us. We were going to go on chronologically to Rav Kook, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and then we'll go on to Rabbi Soloveitchik. So we'll do a little history, a little writings each week, and hopefully we'll have some fun. Okay, thank you.